And I just had an idea, and I asked them, I said to the group, stand up if you made your wealth, because there's a bunch of rich guys that are contributing to a political campaign. Stand up if you made your wealth in real estate. And about 3/4 of those people in that room stood up. That is one of the primary ways that people become wealthy in America. So, again, I want to introduce you to Jai Koch. She is the lady who transforms stay-at-home moms and people that are living normal lives into real estate investors and sometimes real estate moguls. Jai Koch, good morning.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that great intro.
Yeah, well, you deserve it. So let's talk about. I want to go back to the beginning because you were doing something very interesting the last time you were on. We were talking about you had a property. It was just a vacant lot, vacant land.
Right.
And somebody wanted you to help sell it. And vacant land is not that easy to sell because it's like every other vacant land. And so you were going through the whole process that you took to be the seller. And a lot of these principles apply to any kind of real estate that you want to sell. And buying them and having them and developing them and flipping them and everything, you don't get the money until you sell them.
Right.
That's the scorecard. Did you do it? Did you do well or not? That's the scorecard. So let's talk about how you first wanted to understand the property you were going to sell.
Well, and before we get into that, I just want to add, on to what you were saying earlier. Real estate is the kind of investment that is safe in any market, in a good market and in a bad market, because when you're renting it out, there's millions of people and they all need a place to live, and usually when there's a bad economy, most of them are going to be renting. So I just wanted to add that. But so my goal with any deal, with what side I'm on, it doesn't matter, is to create advantages for myself and for my clients. But in order to do that, you really have to take the time and systematically look at the property that you're selling or buying. Either way, it's the same. And you're gonna need to understand it. So I call it, the property details, the good, the bad, the ugly, because you want to know everything. So I had a client come to me, and you said vacant land, but there was a little more to the story than just vacant land. I mean, she wanted to sell it quickly, and she wanted top dollar, and the land was encumbered. It had liens. It had it needs to be cleared. It wasn't like a pristine, perfect property. So I had to do a lot of work. But the first thing, in order to understand the property that I'm selling and what are its pros and cons, I usually start with the zoning. With vacant land, zoning is probably, apart from location, the most important thing, because obviously you're going to have to build something there because there's nothing there. And in order to do that, you need to know what the city is going to allow, what's permitted. And once you figure this out, you know how you're going to market it and who you're marketing this to. In most cases, I would say with vacant land, it's going to be a developer, but it could also be a neighbor who wants to add on to their property, and maybe they have plans in the future to assemble and sell it to a developer. The more the better. So you have these options, or it could be someone who says, "Oh, I want to build my dream home," and this is where I want to live.
How do you easily find out what the zoning is? Another time when you were on, you were talking about how you had bought a property on the water, and then it ended up that you made a fortune on it because it turned out that its highest and best use was to be a bigger apartment complex or apartment house.
T50 zoning, T50 zoning is one of it's one of the better zonings that we have. It's a commercial and residential, so mixed use is what they call it, meaning, and you could build up to 5 stories, depending, there's other rules depending on the size of the lot, but generally by right you can build up to 5 stories, and you could have a mix of commercial, you could have retail on the bottom, you could have a restaurant or whatever, and you can have office space, you could have rent, apartments or condos. So it's really unlimited zoning. So you can find this out if you go to Miami 21. The tax records.
What is Miami 21?
So Miami 21 is it's a county website which shows you the different types of zonings and what is allowed by right. So there's these tables on there when you type in. So there's different, for multifamily, I'll just say there's T3, there's T4, and T5 is the commercial and the residential. But there's all these different zonings, and they all each have their different classifications. But you can find this information out by going to Miami 21. If you Google Miami 21, it'll come up, and then there'll be prompts there. You can fill out the information, and I think you can even search by address or something to see. But if you look at your tax roll, or the tax roll of this property, at the very bottom, it should also state there, what type of zoning it has. At the top, it's just giving you the use, what it's currently being, used
60
as,
seconds.
but not necessarily what it can be. So you have to scroll down a little bit further down, and there you'll find the zoning. And
Miami
then
21.
yes, Miami 21. Yeah, and then it's great because it tells you all the different things that you can do.
So of course, wherever you are, folks, that you're not gonna, you can find. There's probably a website like that for every city.
Yeah, the municipalities are very good about that nowadays. I have property out of state, and I'm very heavily reliant on a lot of those websites.
Stick around, folks. We're going to be right back. I'm speaking to
20.
real estate mogul, and she helps investors get it right. Joy Koch, and we're going to be right back right after this very short break. Real estate expert and teacher and investor, Joy Koch. She doesn't only teach it; she does it primarily, but she also teaches people how to do it. So, Joy, I want to skip over some of the investigation that you're going to do to find out all the things that are good or bad or right or wrong about the property, because I want to get to one of the most important parts of any deal, and that is how much are you going to charge and how much are you willing to pay for it. Money is the scorecard that tells
Right.
whether you did a good deal or not. So let's talk about how are you going to figure out. Here's somebody that came to you with a vacant property. It had things wrong with it, but it was also, you found that it wasn't in a bad neighborhood, or you understood it. Now,
Right.
what are you going to do about deciding how to price it? How much are you going to charge for it when you sell it?
So I put all the data that I've collected on this property, and I put it in a spreadsheet, Excel, and I compare the subject property to the properties that have recently sold, the comparables. And I'm comparing them as similarly as possible. You want to compare apples to apples. So I'm choosing properties that have the same zoning or as close to it as possible. I'm trying to get them as close location-wise as possible. And I'm trying to make sure, the size of the lot is more or less the same, because a larger lot, a larger assemblage is going to sell for more money than a smaller lot. So I don't want to have too many differences. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the average price per square foot, and I'm going to see what's the average, and what's the highest and what's the lowest, and what are the differences. So which one is my subject property, closest to, and then I'm gonna set the price. Now, I said my customer wanted to get a lot of money, so I had to tell her what the most I thought she could get was, and then we had to decide on where to place it because she wanted to sell it quickly. So what I told her to do was, well, don't be the most expensive one, because then you're gonna be last. They're gonna go to the cheaper one first because it's just land at the end of the day. And I said, but when you do this, what happens, because people are naturally competitive by nature, usually what happens is there's buyers out there looking around, and they know the prices. They're aware. They're sniffing around. They're waiting for good deals. And when they see yours come on, it's new, it's going to be priced, right. You want to be lower, than your competitor if you want to sell fast. I mean, if you don't care how long it takes you to sell, then you can do whatever price you want, but you're going to sit around and you're going to get stale. So what happens is that these buyers that have been looking around are going to see it, and they're all gonna come like sharks to chum, because you're throwing out this bait, this well-priced property that just hit the market. You're the new kid on the block, and everybody wants to see what's going on. So what you do is you create this frenzy, and then you get people who are competitive, and usually these type of people, these investors, they're wealthy people who are used to getting their way, and they don't like to lose. So they may be, willing to, overbid someone just because, they want to get it for whatever reason, because of their ego. We've talked about that, in previous shows, how ego can get in the way. But I'm using that to my advantage. And so it worked. We had multiple offers, competing offers. We went over asking price, over the list price. And, we ended up selling this property for more money than the highest comp that we had, which was in a better location, and it had better zoning. I mean, it was really more than I had anticipated I would be able to do for her. And not only that, we got the buyer to pay all the closing costs, including the sellers. So, I mean, that's extra money right there. And it was all done, I think, in like a week's time. I mean, I had that under contract. I could have had it under contract even sooner, but that, like I said, there was some encumbrances, and the seller wanted to have a few things taken out, but everything was on her terms. She took her time to accept and sign a contract because I gave her that ability. I gave her the upper hand, and I've done that for myself. But a lot of people are afraid to use this strategy because they think that if they price themselves lower than what they want to get, that's the most they'll ever get, and that just isn't the case. It hasn't been my experience.
Tell me that one more time about how you're getting the upper hand. This is probably the most. We're going to stop for a break in a second, and I want you to come back and review that. There's nothing more important that you can be telling the audience about the skill of doing these deals than what you just said, and I want you to do it again, okay? But
okay.
We're gonna take a little bit of a break.
You always want the upper hand.
Yes, and we're going to talk about how to get the upper hand in a deal. And we're talking to Joy Koch. She is the lady who transforms stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home dads and stay-at-home people into real estate investors and often real estate moguls. And we're going to come back and just finish up with Joy Koch. Just a few more minutes left. Stick around. This brings us to everybody in the world, and that's where a lot of our audience is. So we're talking to Joy Koch. And Joy, I want you to repeat what is probably the most important thing we've done on the program today, and that is about getting the upper hand in a negotiation, in a real estate deal, but really in anything. And getting the upper hand is important because there really is no upper hand, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Well, she wants to sell it, and the other guy wants to buy it.
Right. Well, in this particular situation, yeah, if you allow yourself to, and this is where, everything, all of my steps that I take and all the time, which it does take time, but you see how it pays off. So I wouldn't do it if it didn't work. But you need to know, like I said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you need to look at the deal objectively from both the seller side and the buyer side. If you have to look at it, what does the buyer want? What will make them happy? What is the benefit to them? And you as the seller, what do you want? What are you trying to get? And how can you present your package of what you're trying to sell in a way that is going to make the buyer, act, the way you want them to. And psychology, like I said, plays a big deal in this. Knowing that people are competitive by nature, and I didn't invent this. I mean, this exists for years and years and years, right? When you go, if you've ever followed an art auction or, Sotheby's or whatever the other auction houses are, you know that it happens quite often that people pay more for something than what they thought it was worth and what they listed it at, because it's that frenzy, that buying frenzy, or that need to win that comes into play. And as long as you understand that, you can use this effectively for any side. I've done it as a buyer. I was the buyer competing in a multiple offer situation, and I knew that if I wanted the property, it was a good deal. It was a bank-owned property. I knew it was going to be a good deal, but I had to know the price. I had to know what it was worth, and I had to put a lot of thought in it to think. I had 14 other competing offers, and I had to figure out how I was going to get this property without overpaying, and I put a lot of effort, and I actually got the property. But
what is it that you did to get it without overpaying?
I did the same thing, the spreadsheet, and figured out, what is this really worth? And what is it? It wasn't producing any income at the time. It was vacant. It was a duplex. It was vacant. I had to do market analysis of the rents and really figure out what I could rent it for, and come up with a cap rate and all that, and figure out what it had to make sense on paper. So I had to come up with a fair number that would be good enough to beat out other people, but still be good enough of a deal for me to want it. And I came up with that number by
60 seconds.
Figuring out with the comps and what they should sell at and what it would rent at and how much I would make on it. And I was able to do that. I didn't get it at first, though. And they called.
So Jai, how do people find your work?
So I'm on the website. I have a website, realtorinmiami.com. I'm on Instagram as Realtor in Miami, and you can call my cell phone. I answer. 305-984-6966.
That's it.
That's all the time we've got, Jai. You did a great job.
Thank you.
10 seconds.
And
so we can all live
report.
the American dream.
American dream in the box.